Brigadier, ladies and gentlemen, it's a tremendous privilege to be here this evening for three reasons that I can instantly think of. First, it is a massive privilege to be the Member of Parliament for Dover and Deal. As all of us know, there is no better constituency in this country, and no better place to be and to live, and I can tell you to represent. Second reason it's great to be here this evening is we all know that members of the Dover Society are by far the most refined and outstanding members of this community, and I speak with no bias, being a member myself. And I just want to say how tremendous it is to be part of this great and august organisation. And then the third reason is that this is one of the places where I win the raffle. So I will go from here this evening back to my wife, who will be very pleased to have some nice bath salts and soap. And I find that a marriage full of bath salts and soaps is a happy marriage. And I therefore am a more content husband. I also note, looking at the minutes from last year, that your former speaker, last year, was Dr. Robert Goldfield, the Chief Executive of the Harbour Board. And I think that's great, because I like to stand on the shoulders of giants. And I'd like to thank you all for having me, for putting up with me as your Member of Parliament, putting up with me longer as your candidate before then than the Conservative interest as it was then, now the Dover and Deal interest, very firmly. And I also just want to sort of kind of just talk for about 10 minutes, no more than that, because you don't want to listen to a boring politician go on, and then take questions. Because I think it's far more interesting to grill your politicians than to listen to them blabbering on. So let me start. Let me take you back nearly a year ago. It feels like a decade, I tell you. But it was only just less than a year ago. There I was on election night, suddenly finding myself sort of elected to be your Member of Parliament and to serve as your Member of Parliament. I had this tremendous sense of elation that I was going to be the Member of Parliament with the best constituency this country has to offer. Very fine moment. And then next morning, you know, the last balloon popped, got over the hangover, you managed to wake up again, and you suddenly think, my goodness, what am I going to do? And then the realisation hit me that I had come on deck at a time when we had had our hospital sort of not quite the hospital it used to be in former times. What was I going to do about it? Having criticised this matter, suddenly it was my problem. Then to find that the port was just about to be sold off any day, what was I to do about that, and how was I to tackle this? And then I'd said I wanted more jobs and money for our corner of South East Kent. But we don't really get much jobs and money, not as much as we should do, and haven't had in recent times. How was I going to deliver on these pledges, which I had said to the electorate, I will find tooth and nail? So since that time, as I think most of you probably know, having read the local paper, turned on the local TV and see my sort of smiling face sort of waving out of it, and the various boring leaflets that I put round, you will know that I've been fighting hard to stop our port being sold off and to make sure that we, the people, own our port. And it became increasingly, as time passed, from people thinking that it was just a madcap idea of a young buck MP who was just chancing his arm, into something much more substantial over time, to the point that recently we had a referendum with a result which was 98% in favour of community ownership for our port. And all the MPs down the House of Commons, they all say to me, Charlie, what have you got going on in that constituency? This is like North Korea. You're running down there, you know, you're rigging these elections. And I said, I know. Just, you know, listen to what people want and try to deliver it. It's not about left, not about right. The whole People's Board idea is highly pragmatic. Just down the line, listen to what people say and trying to deliver those essential things that we as a community want to see. And on the hospital, I managed to make some progress on the hospital. That's now moving forward. Again, you have to watch that hospital trust. We know from bitter experience, don't we? You have to watch them like a hawk and make sure that you hold their feet to the fire and keep that actually happening. And I want to see, within 3 years, a new hospital built in Dover with beds. So that's a key priority for me, and I think a key priority for all of us. I can see a lot of people here who've probably gone to Ashford and Margate and tried to scratch their heads on how they get there and how exactly they can afford the taxi journey if they can't find their way there by public transport and if they can't drive. So I think we all know about that problem. I'm very focused and very passionate about that. And then when it comes to jobs and money, that's a hard one, isn't it? You know, it's difficult to actually, you can bang the drum, and I do, and you can try and sort of get things moving locally, and talk to people and persuade them to invest in Dover, and keep on and keep on and keep on, and then out of a clear sky, suddenly Pfizer drops in on your head, and you think, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to manage this transition? How are we going to safeguard what we have in this community for our community? So I've been working very hard on that with Laura Sands next door, who represents Sandwich, to make sure that we save everything we can and try and move our community forward and try and get the best we can. Better rail links, better road links, and raise the profile of our corner of England. Because we have one thing going for us, guys. One thing that is really important. Everyone has heard of Dover. That is a massive asset. We have an incredible brand. And because everyone has heard of Dover, and everyone knows where Dover is, which is even better, it makes it easier for me to push the case for Dover. And for those who love Dover, as we all do, to make the case for this great town and this great community. And I think that is a key asset, particularly when it comes to things like tourism. And what I look at in terms of how the port could be, how regeneration could be, how the western area of our port could be developed, and the kind of change we could make to Dover with regeneration, with tourism, with getting more people to visit Dover and spend time in Dover, I realised that we could well make more progress more quickly than we think. But I'm very loath to give any kind of pledges, any kind of promises. I always say, rather boringly, I will do my best. Because I think too often politicians promise things and then don't deliver them. And it's better if I say, look, this is what I'm going to try and do. I may not succeed, but I'm going to try and do things. Now, that's the local side of things, my local priorities. Now let's move up to Parliament. Here I am in Parliament. My first few days there, wandering around, having this great sense and great idea that you can just change the world, marry an MP, and then suddenly you realise there are 650 of you and the executive has all the power. And you as a backbencher have precisely no power whatsoever. If you stand up in the House of Commons and say something just outrageous, no one will notice. The best secrets of the world can be told in the House of Commons and no one will ever be the wiser. In fact, if you want to splurge on national secrets, just talk about it at 10 o'clock at night, shortly before the vote, and no one will be listening. So, what do you do? How do you actually get change, get things to a constituency, and change the nation and the kind of policy of the nation overall? And it pretty clearly and pretty quickly came to my view that the only way to do it, frankly, is to marshal the fourth estate. Isn't it, Sarah?
Absolutely.
I realise if you want change, wind up the tabloids, wind up the national press, get on TV, and bang the drum. So that's what I've basically been doing, certainly as far as our port's concerned. You know, that's been a serious and national issue. And that's caused the whole centre of gravity to shift. And then there's a whole business of how you actually sort of do things in the chamber. You have to be very quick thinking. You know, literally you're making a speech, another guy over the opposite side stands up and says, oh, but Mr. Elphicke, what about so-and-so? Well, they don't say Mr. Elphicke, they say, well, one thing, I'm listening carefully to the argument of the Honourable Member for Dover and Deal. And I'd just like to ask him, nightmare statistic, you know, what do you do? And you've got to be very, very quick on your feet, very sort of quick-witted, otherwise you end up rapidly looking like a fool. So I decided my first year I would speak lots in the House of Commons and work out how the place works. And throw myself into the deep end. So I got myself elected to the 1922 committee, which is the executive of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, if you like. I got myself on the Public Administration Select Committee, which sounds really boring, it's all about paper clips, you think. It's actually about IT disasters. You would not believe how bad government is when it comes to computers. It's just astonishing. And it's fascinating. So I've learned a lot about how government can completely mess everything up. And I think it's a really useful experience. And useful experience to push government to think more creatively about how to spend our money better. And the other things I've been doing is sitting on bill committees. I was on the last Finance Bill Committee. I'm now sitting on the Welfare Reform Bill Committee. much to the delight, I think, of a lot of my constituents who write railing letters to me about, first of all, people who come here from overseas, but they'd rather not come here, and secondly, people who don't work, they really think should work. And sitting on the Welfare Reform Bill Committee is all about making sure that benefits are targeted at those who need them, and that we encourage people to get into work and make work pay. That's the philosophy behind it. Whether you agree with it or not, that's the philosophy. I find these committees, this kind of work on making laws, really interesting experience. And then the other thing I've been doing is I've tabled a bill, a 10-minute rule bill it's called. So that is a brief canter through my work as a constituency MP, as a national politician working in the House of Commons. And, well, feel free to ask me any questions. I'll be really delighted to answer.
Charlie, how do you get the speaker to call you? I mean, how's that done?
Well, there's two ways. First of all, the business of the House is divided each day into sort of two sections. First is holding the executive to the account. So that is questions in Parliament. And that lasts about an hour, each department, each day, different departments. And you put into a ballot. It's called the shuffle. And if you win the ballot, then you get to stand up, ask a question, they answer it, you ask a supplementary, but they don't know what you're going to ask, and then they answer that. So that way you can raise the constituency issue in many cases that you want to ask to a particular department. The second issue is, how do you get to speak in the debate? Now this for me is a problem. I'm, as some of you may know if you watch the Parliament channel, I'm what you might consider a chatty MP. I speak quite a lot. And the problem with the Parliament is, the more often you speak, the more down the list you go in terms of when you'll get called to speak in the debate. So if you're a completely useless MP, and you never speak, and never do anything, then if you put in to speak to a debate, you'll be called right at the top. And then if you're a very chatty MP, then you're always at the end. So I'm always at the end of the queue. But you can always make an intervention. So let's say, for example, you have a shadow minister on their feet, or a minister on their feet. You can then say, oh, will the right honourable gentleman give way, and then make a point to them. And some of the best speeches you make in Parliament are actually interventions. Because you either, you can make a very, very clear point, either for constituency or about some issue of policy, which then everyone thinks, oh, that's a good one, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So you can raise the profile of an issue quite easily and effectively. So it's not just about making long, boring speeches at sort of 9 o'clock at night. It's these interventions are actually a very powerful way to ensure that our government is held to account and that policy is considered better.